For a man who has lived not even a single lifetime, you are wise man, Dr. Van Helsing. Welcome to Into the Fringe, number 38. Make sure and join us Sunday on Halloween for our Cardinal Sin 500 subscriber Halloween hangout. You ready, Mexican Iron Man? Okay, here we go.
Time and really giving this serious thought that perhaps the UFO origin is for the future. Yeah. So tonight we have two great speakers. We have Tom Nicholl, who is the Kansas State Director for the UFO Network. He's a mechanical engineer. And we have Marc Davenport, who studied chemical engineering.
Can you hear me now?
Is a professional manufacturing engineer and author Visitors from Time. So without having any further, I'd like to put the show over to Tom Nicholl, please. I guess it works. Let me know if you can't hear me when I yell. I've had a lot of hobbies in my life, and UFOs kind of found me. It was strictly an accident. If anybody said that I knew anything about UFOs beforehand, well, I'd say they were silly. I did talk to two people that said, yeah, I guess we saw one, but that's it. But when you have one that's real loud and clear, I say loud, but not in a true sense because it's absolute silence. But
Hi.
When you see one,
can you hear me?
Clearly,
yeah.
And you know they exist.
Hey.
The
I wonder what the deal
part
was.
about it is that you don't ever have to listen to anybody telling you anything that they don't exist. Or anybody saying,
Boy,
well,
that's
that could have been this or could have been that or something. You know, when you're at that point, you know that they do exist, and there's all the trash and all the static is gone from anything that you read, listen to, or talk to. So that makes it a nice advantage over anybody that just that picks up this information on the side.
Hey, Chris Persia, Rex Smith,
Frankly, if
Mark
my
Lopez.
family and some neighbors hadn't seen it at the same time,
Awesome with you
first
guys
of all,
to
I'd
be
be
here.
divorced, and the family would probably think I'm a nut, and the neighbors would be sure. So what happened? And the perfect conditions. Sun was at our back, 10-15 minutes before sundown. We're facing the east, and our son-in-law, what is that up there out to the north of us? And that, we're looking straight east, and here to the north was this brilliant red-orange light. Well, I've been around welding for 14 years, and around arc welding, and frankly, this was a lot brighter than anything I'd ever seen, and especially at that distance. So I ran to get a telescope, and I called for a daughter to get a pair of binoculars. I was so shaken up that I knew where the binoculars were, but I couldn't tell her. I also walked right by 7 cameras. I didn't pick up one of them. One of them was loaded with movie film. Now this is not uncommon, because by the way, I've learned since then that there's many people goes out to look for UFOs, and they have a camera hung around their neck, sitting on the top of the car, and never take a picture. But anyway, so when we got the binoculars and telescope, you can see that this is a disc, a metallic one. And it's flat on the bottom, and it's curved on the top like part of a sphere. And when you can see it clearly like this, along the trailing edge with 3 green or red-orange lights around the trailing edge. And it was going through space like it was on a long wave, like in a quartering sea, and which the light was turned up like this, and when it floated a little bit, you could see brown or green reflections off the ground. So that's if you say that, why then hey, maybe this thing is somewhere plus or minus a few hundred feet or close to 500 feet off the ground. And it was probably 1,000 feet plus or minus 200 or 300 feet. That's the best guesses we could have. But here we see this going through the air. It's not the speed of a small plane. Now when you see it going that small, you had time to pass the binoculars around, take a quick look through the telescope. Looking through the telescope is a little difficult because you're picking up such a small field that you have a tough time holding it on there to see it. But in the telescope, you could see vapor going up to the top, like it's coming from the edges of it, like it might have been hot or whatever, went up to the top, went with it. And it didn't trail. If you have vapor that doesn't trail when you're going 100 miles an hour, I want to see it. Now, there's nothing about this that makes any sense. Nothing we know would fly under those conditions. We don't know anything that has vapor coming out of it that's going to go straight up. All is moving through the air. So, and I was able to see it at the very end. Went on further south, and then over farmland, watching it, and a puff of smoke, the white stuff shot down, and 2 heavy pieces, 2 black things went down to the ground. I have no idea what happened. All I can tell you is what I saw. And I reported it to the WDAF TV. They said it. I said, "Do you hear any reports?" He says, "No." Oh. Switchboard's lighting up like a Christmas tree. He said, "I'll call you." Took my name, and I was the last ever heard of him. Called the Johnson County Sheriff. Sheriff got the report. Eventually came out to the house. And he went to a neighbor's house instead of ours, and he told the neighbor that he had 25 reports. Comes to our house, talks to my wife because I'm gone, and tells them that, hey, nobody reported. Why would the sheriff tell the neighbor there were 25 and tell us none but ours? All right. So then I also called Richard Scavauer, which is the base. broke the machinery.
We're not the only ones with technical difficulties.
Anyway, took me about
Really?
I got it.
Yeah, they broke my lavalier microphone.
You want to stay in it?
Back in the 90s, those things were expensive.
Now, how is it? Okay, can you hear me? Richard's I called them to report this because their tower could have seen it because they were in between me and the UFO was between me and the Richard's tower. And at one time, I would guess we were pretty close to halfway. It was. And I reported, of course, you get the officer of the day and go through the normal routine, about 5-10 minutes. They found, oh yeah, we got a form for that. It turns out it's 5 pages long, and where you were born and all this good stuff. You have flat feet, I guess, everything else you can think of. But anyway, so I got in the car and went out back and forth across the farmland. The roads were about a mile apart at that point because it was all owned by one man. And couldn't find anything. Nobody had seen it. Zip. So I got back. I just crawled into bed, and here a call came in from Richard Skibauer. Said, well, there were no planes in the area at the time and no blips on radar. Click. Hung up before you could ask any questions or say anything. So, nothing happened. Nothing further. And every time, I say for the next 2-3 weeks or so that I have lunch with somebody, I said, tell me the story. Finally, one of the fellows that got me into the Navy like years ago, he said, why don't you go and talk to the skipper over at the Navy base? Since you've been down and since you worked on some highly secret devices for the bomb sites during the war. I said, fine. So anyway, I got a hold of him, and to make a long story short, he said, through a channel, so I should go talk to the general at Richard Skibauer. Got a hold of his assistant, and full colonel said, we'll have somebody out there. And in fact, it came out the next Saturday. We went through where it was, all the details about this. And my wife asked him and said, do you believe in UFOs? He said, yes, I've had to chase him. And as he left, he said, you don't hear from me in about 2 weeks, give me a call. Well, 2 weeks I hadn't heard, so I gave him a call. I said, have you heard anything about this UFOs? He said, no, and you won't either. That was the end of that one. So you can't get anything quicker than anybody to shut up to her about that than the treatment I've gotten. So what reason I'm bringing this up is, hey, this is my first experience with UFO, and this is a cover-up by whatever agencies in the government that I ran into. Went further. I talked to and wrote several letters of information to our Congressman Larry Wynn, and we corresponded back and forth, and finally, after I guess it was maybe 6 months or more, he got the letter from the liaison officer that works between Congress and the Air Force, and this man who was a colonel, and he had given a letter about my case to the congressman. The congressman, I don't think you're going to like this, but it was a re-evaluation. Now, I never heard about the first re-evaluation, but there are 2 re-evaluations of my report, and there was a laundry bag, plastic laundry bag with a candle in it. That's about a quick kiss off, shut up, dumb thing, because if I hadn't had 1,000 hours in the air of the pilot, if I hadn't seen every type of storm and thing that you could think of, from hurricanes to St. Elmo's fire to inverted thunderheads and everything that you can think of in the skies, and my major was in aeronautical engineering. Now, somebody tell me or laundry bag, because we made, when we were kids, we made those out of paper. And we put little candles, or we put kerosene lights in it, and shoot this float away, and hope it didn't burn down your neighbor's house. But anyway, so what I'm saying is, this is my experience, first time, and this is the kind of the shut-off I got. And time went on, and I did join NICAP, and I sent my report into NICAP, and through that, I got contacted with Jim McDonald and Dr. Heineck, and some real neat people in this field, some real sharp people, and some people who did a lot of study of it. I'm just a neophyte at this point. But eventually, I'd say within a couple of years of our sighting, which was 1967, Dr. Cardinal had been given $400,000 from the Air Force to analyze, study the UFO phenomenon. Well, I don't know if you ever read it, but Dr. Cardinal came out with a report like this. He dragged it on for 1 year. It was supposed to have been $400,000. Then he got it up to another 150, 250. In other words, he dragged it out for about 3 years, as I recall, and more money, of course. But if it wasn't for the fact that when I was working on this bomb site for the bombing system for the Navy, I was working for his department indirectly. Well, directly, I should say, because my unit was assigned to the National Bureau of Standards, of which he was in charge of. He was the head of it. So here I said, hey, at least I was able to talk to this guy. So I called him. He was at the University of Colorado. And after 4 calls, I got into it. And I told him about it, and I said, look, you give me 4 men and a boy and magnetometers and whatever, and I said, we can find the remains of this thing. He said, well, this is the toughest job I ever had. I can't get any information. And so I'm giving it to you right here in the handbasket. And I said, here's a trash case, in my opinion. I said, I can't prove it, but I think there is. So, I said, now, for God's sakes, you've got it, you're flying back and forth all over the country. You certainly could come into Kansas City for 5 minutes. I said, I'll even buy you a tired hot dog. We're going to have lunch or something at the airport. I don't care. I said, you remember Parkey? Parkey, that's the guy I worked for. He said, yeah. I said, I remember it because you asked for one of my reports. That's how I remember the whole, this thing. Well, anyway, zip. But it was interesting that I went to a Yukon meeting about 4 or 5, maybe 3 or 4 years after that, and Dr. Dave Saunders gave a talk. Dave Saunders worked for Condon, and so did his another fellow, and they wrote a book about how poorly the handling of UFO cases by the Condon report, Condon people. So that he wrote this other, say, UFOs, yes, and I don't know what the rest of the title was. But he had a printout. He had 70,000 printouts on the computer taken from the Cardinal reports of the ones that they were studying. And to say nothing, and since then he's gotten over, I suppose, about 120,000. But anyway, I looked, opened it up, here's my report. Because Dr. Cardinal said that he is supposed to get all the reports in from anywhere in the Air Force world. And he told me on the phone that as soon as it came in, he would give me a call. Well, of course, he never called. But here I found my report, but it was by a phone call to Dr. Condon. It had never gone through the circuit of the military. I'll just give you something to start off with. I'm going to show you a few slides. I'm going to have to go rather rapidly because my time's been cut down by whatever we started with. But as I've been in this field, let's say I've been about 27 years. Well, in this, there are a lot of people ask, hey, they say, for one thing, I don't see anything in the papers these days. Well, I'll tell you, they're not reading. They're not looking at it. Because, for example, How many saw the article about the 6-mile diameter UFO over China? How many saw that? Nobody. 3 years ago, that was in the paper. Kansas City Star. All right, and how many heard about the Japanese cargo plane pilot that saw one about the size of 2 football fields over Alaska? How many saw that one? 2. Now these are in our papers, our major newspapers, and I have to admit that I have to read the Kansas City Star because that's where I live. I don't know how many heard about the reports that in Russia, when they really broke up the Soviet Union, they sent out information to the people, hey, we want reports on UFOs, whatever you know about it. The first month, they got 36,000 cases. That's a pretty good number. During that, by the way, when Ufon was in contact with the Russian, who was in the trained the cosmonauts, and I can't think of his name. He's since died. But anyway, we had contact, and we had tapes from him, and we translated it and so on. He sent us 20 cases that happened in Russia. One of which they saw one that was 2,500 feet diameter. And also, if you're living in this field, you have to ask the questions. You just don't stand around and look at a wall. But, for example, I like to always ask questions of pilots. Having been one, I'd like to hear what they have to say. And it's amazing how many will open up if you get them off to the side or a little confidential position. They sometimes think that you're part of the Air Force or somebody knows their business. But anyway, for example, it wasn't too long ago, I was in Chicago, and flights were going to be delayed. I had a chance to talk to the pilots about it. I said, why have you guys seen the UFOs? Well, I suppose you believe that, but you wouldn't ask the question. I said, I sure do, because I saw one loud and clear. And then they looked at me again, and I talked a little bit more about flying or whatever. Pretty soon the guy said, okay, I'll take my experience. And there's 3 of them in the cockpit, and 2 of them had separate experiences with different crews. One of which, he said, well, we were over Kansas at night, and we could see 3 red-orange lights ahead of us. And we thought we were looking down the tailpipes of some Navy fighter planes or something like that. He said, boy, we got that grew away. All of a sudden it shot in all different directions so fast. It was impossible to say how fast they were going. The other fellow, he said we were on a flight to the West Coast. We had to stop once or twice, maybe Albuquerque, Phoenix, or something like this. And we picked up one on the right-hand wing, and as we were going to land, by that thing would disappear. And we'd come back up in the air, and that thing would show up again on our wing, and every now and then it'd move around to the other way. And they did that on the 2 landings and 2 takeoffs. I like to fish. I fished down in Florida, and after fishing with my brother, we were doing a lousy job of catching fish. So finally, after some time, we decided to get a guide. And who shows up? The guy that had been in the special services in the Air Force, retired. So I had to ask him that question. He said, yeah. He says he and 18 fellows were being transported from Oahu to Guam. And this was in the last 5 years. And he said, broad daylight, here this thing came up on the right-hand side, a big cylindrical shaped thing, and we took pictures of it, and the thing came around on the other side, took pictures of it. 6 fellows on board that had a camera, and all 6 of them were taking pictures. And he said that then he got up ahead of it, went to the skies fast, and disappeared instantaneously, almost. He said, no, I said, hey, how big was this thing? Oh, about over 200 feet. It's good, you know. And he said, I said, well, first of all, what was the shape of it? It was cylindrical, like a cigar, And I said, now, I've seen some pictures. I told him, I said, I've seen pictures of some of these that are on an angle. Was it in line with the axis of the flight? Yeah, it was down at that kind of an angle. He said, as soon as we landed in Guam, there was somebody there that picked up all of our cameras, took all of our film, didn't say a thing, gone. Let me go ahead and look for it. There's a friend of mine in Kansas City, I can't name him, but he was an officer, a photographic officer, and he worked in the Blue Book. You know about that. That's supposedly where a lot of the stuff on UFOs went. Okay. Hey, he said he processed thousands of feet of gun camera film during the Korean War. And as soon as he finished processing, some two men came in from Washington with handcuffs on a briefcase, and off they went with the film. So anyway, so you ask these questions, that's what you get. Let me show you some pictures. I'm going to go through very rapidly, mainly because time is short. Now this fellow was the first one that really started all this stuff about UFOs because he's a fellow Ken Arnold, and he was a former Air Force pilot, but he had his own plane. He saw 9 of them under him on 1947. And by the way, within a week to 9 days after this, a crash occurred of 2 UFOs in Arizona. And you'll hear more about that later. Go ahead. Next. This was one taken by military, and I think it was taken by the Canadian Air Force. This is the moon, by the way. They say it's off to the right-hand side. Next. One of the problems with UFO studies, and by the way, MUFON is, and everything, everybody, investigators and everybody connected with it are volunteers. It's their own, there's no money in it, there's no rewards other than, hey, we believe in it, we're trying to find it and learn about it as a hobby. And one of the toughest ones is to find out what goes on as far as light is concerned. You see that in the middle of the night, and you get so many reports like this, and what can you tell them about it? It'd be nice if you could take pictures of it with diffraction grading, take pictures of it with special cameras, and get some distances and angles and so on. Dr. Rutledge, down at the University of Southeast Missouri State, has made some studies.
This was similar to the ship that abducted me before the show, sir.
Program, and one of the 2 things that I asked him, because we hear
scrub that alien out of your suit.
And you kind of get indulged with it. But one is that farmer will see a UFO out in the back 40, and he sees this bright light, and cattle making noises, and he wakes up at 2:30 in the morning. And here light comes out of this thing, and it telescopes and steps down to the ground. Who knows how to make a light do that? So I asked him about that. And I said, have you seen it? He said, yes. He's seen it, and he says he's trying to get the pictures of it through diffraction grading, and he had several different methods. He wanted to find out, first of all, if this was air that was being ionized, or whether there was another material coming out of it, or was it in these plasma of some kind. Okay, next. This is an island off Brazil. This is a blow up of this, and it was taken by the Brazilian Navy. Next. We'll have to go kind of fast. This was taken by the Royal Canadian Air Force. This thing was going faster than they were. They were trying to set up east-west coast record with the 3 planes. Next. This is our own plane, and this thing followed around a very extensive trip. Ended up here, a plane landed in Forbes, and the next picture shows the blow up of that, of the UFO, and these are the bright lights, whether they're trading lights or not, I don't know. But as again, remember, these are 2nd, 3rd generation copies of pictures. And obviously, if I had taken them, they'd been a lot better. Yes. Mansville, Ohio. Helicopter crew flying to Cleveland at night. Next. This was the crew. They were National Guard. Next. This is the way what they described it, what they saw coming at them on a collision course from the right, and all of a sudden they went into a dive to avoid it and tried to put it down to like 2,000 feet a minute. And the next thing they knew, light came all through the cabin, a green light. They couldn't even see the instruments. And finally, after about 15 minutes, this UFO left them, and they were 3,500 feet higher than they were. They put them in a dive and they're higher. Okay, next. This was a photo, one of many that lost his life chasing one. I think he crashed in somewhere in Kentucky. Next. Farmer out here in McMinnville. Next. He took this with a little systematic camera. And we can't, everybody has tested this film. I've heard some real super experts say, hey, this is real. Part of the spots, but that's picked up the stories of the film. Next. Blow-up of it. This is what it looks like, and if you can, there's an exact copy. It looks like exactly the same thing come out of Paris. Yes? Next. Now, if you saw this going around through the sky and you're an astronomer, it'd be pretty hard to figure out what in the devil that would be. We don't know any comets. It would do this in a short period of time. We don't know of any meteors, planetoids, asteroids, nothing. We'll make a trip like that. Next. This is probably the closest to what we saw. And here's a little light here and light here, and this light bouncing off the top of it. I can't tell you what that little white flare up there is, but again, this was a storage problem in the film. Next. Now this is a while. We experts have looked at this film. This was taken in Oregon. And why we're going to get 3 different images on this, I don't know. Next. These 2 fellows, fishermen, they were picked up, taken on board, and examined, put back on the beach where they were fishing. Next. Picked up, they didn't touch the ground. Next. Looked into an object, he drew this, he thinks of something like this. Next. This is what he thinks they look like. Look like a couple of guys around here, I think. Next. This little girl up in Iowa saw a UFO come off of this field right across the street from them. Next. Coming from the air, this soybean was dehydrated and it didn't grow for 4 years. Nothing grew there. Everything was treated the same way. Farmers got back and forth over it. Next. Betty and Barney Hill. Now they were one of the first real cases that's been documented and so forth about abduction, and they, I'm trying to think of the book, Fuller wrote the book. Anyway, interrupted time, and they lost 2 hours of time, which is just almost typical. Next. This young man was in a shed. Dog made a lot of noise, some sheep made noise, and this was in Delphus. It's not too far from here. Next. He was in a shed like this. This thing came over his head and looked up and was red, brilliant red, and he was blinded for I don't know how long, but not many, several minutes at least. The dog was blinded for about 2 weeks, and it broke a limb off the tree here. Knocked down a tree over here, and next. Here's a limb that was broken. Next. And here's this circle. His mother came out at night and noticed that this glowed. She picked it up with her fingers, and the fingers became numb. And would you believe, 10 months later, a Dr. Harder from the University of California came out and did the same thing, and his fingers became numb. Now, the mother's fingers were numb for several months, but they finally went away. However, one little place she scratched her leg, and that's still numb, last I heard. Next. The snow wouldn't melt, would not go into the surface. It laid on the top, the cause of the next slide. This is the soil taken outside the rain. This is the rain soil, and it will not absorb the moisture. Next. Now this is down at this is the Cash Landrum case, which is this woman with her daughter was driving and a grandson came around the corner. Next, this is north of Houston, and this thing was sitting on the road, and they had to obviously stopped very quickly, and they all got out to look at whatever it was, and then pretty soon the older woman and this young boy, about 12 years old, jumped back in the car. The other gal stayed out there a little bit longer. She got back in later, and the steering wheel was so hot that she couldn't touch it. And they have, I don't know what kind of period it was, but they became nauseous, vomited, and eventually lost hair. The next picture, I think we might see. This is another picture, a view of it. Hey, a bunch of helicopters came around. Next. This is the, I think this is the older one, and this is the boy. Next. And you see she's lost hair here. Next. And some more. And a lesion on her hand. And next. Next. This is a kind of a typical UFO landing trace case, of which we have probably over 5,000 of them. As a friend of mine, Ted Phillips, has collected over 5,000 such cases where people have seen UFOs come up from it and have left something. That's not a true crop circle, that's what we're talking about. But this is the reeds above are dehydrated, there's water down below, and that is kept intact, just like they were originally. And I'm going to call it quits on this one, because they're running out of time. But anyway, we'll have question and answer after the next speaker. If you have any questions, save them then, or unless I'll take one real quick one right now. If you got it. Anybody have one? Yeah, what slides it show us? Oh, I've got quite a few more. I just don't have time. The part that I have, other than Barney Hill, I didn't even touch the abduction cases, because this is a whole new field of which they're just coming out of the woodwork. Apparently, from the last survey, there's something like 3 million people believe have been abducted. I thank you.
All right. Yes. So this is never before seen footage, because the content is exclusive to you, and you're the one, from what I understand, you're the one who filmed it. You were there, literally live, and so these are actually, you have to unmute yourself. We can't hear you. You have to unmute yourself. Yeah, turn the volume up.
How about that?
Yeah, you're great. You're great.
I'm the one that put on the event.
Wow, neato. And there, you got some freebies here related from the event?
We do.
Any brochures,
We have
pamphlets?
freebies from the actual event itself.
Okay.
All you have to do is email me at gil@sunflower.com, subject UFO goodies, and I will send them out to you.
That's awesome. So we just put our address or PO box where we and you mail them out?
Put
That's
that in
awesome.
the email.
Now, I don't want to be a jerk, but do you happen to have any of them that are signed by either of the guys?
Oh, yes. I have lecture programs that are signed by Marc Davenport, but I don't have a lot, and those are going to be...
we're going to give those away at the end of the season?
We're going to give those away probably first episode of season 2.
Okay. All right,
But
well, cool.
you can't beat free, you know.
No, sir. No, sir. And why did you call him a warm up? Why did you call him a warm up to Nicholl? I'm just curious. I mean,
Well,
versus Marc Davenport.
in the sense that a local band would warm up for a touring act,
Okay.
you know, that sort of a thing.
Okay.
I literally got a call, and this guy knew everything about me and the event and what was going on, and he failed to mention who he was, and I was like really suspicious of this guy. Who is this guy? What does he want? Why is he calling me? It's 9:30 at night, you know.
But for you, in the morning.
Yeah, right. No, that was back when you know, when it got dark out, I went to sleep. But you know, it freaked me out. I was like, what kind of conspiracy is this? Who do you work for? And I actually said to him, who are you? Who do you work for? And then he told me who he was, and the jig was up. And so the joke was on me. The joke was on Cardinal Sin.
Are you saying Mark played the joke, or he was just kind of messing with you?
I think Mark probably.
I think Mark was playing with you, bro.
I think Mark played the joke on me. Yeah.
Because what the audience doesn't know is, and I didn't know this either until recently. First of all, that book that Mark is one of my all-time favorite. Like, if I had to pick 5, when I've probably read at least 100, like Gary, someone or Gary. I mean, I've read everything that I can find out there. His would be in my 5. If I ended up on the desert island and I had to pick
Visitors
5
from Time.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I have read that book so many times that the cover's worn, like pages are marked up. Golly, that was like way back. It came out a long time ago. But one of the things I like about, Nicholl isn't really a warm-up band. I mean, didn't he run MUFON, right?
He was the Kansas State director for the Mutual UFO Network. Yeah. And then Marc Davenport was the state sectional director for the Mutual UFO Network. So inside the state, you have sections, and each of those sections have directors. Right. And Marc Davenport was a director for a section, so he was a state section director.
Now, what year did this footage hail from?
1993.
1993.
I'm dating myself.
Well, you were born before then. I know that, but
well, yes.
Yes, sir. So we're looking at a tape that's been in the archives for almost 30 years, or 20, almost
actually
30 years.
That's true. And if you this is the one of the goodies that people will receive. And at the top it says about Third Eye Productions, and it tells you the little story about how I started a UFO group at Kansas University, the University of Kansas, and it turned into Third Eye Productions, which was the promotions company that I used to put on all these lectures, including Stanton Friedman, who's coming up, Bill Caulfield, who is a 40-year veteran pilot for one of the big carriers, and he saw all kinds of stuff. We have the first birthday party for Third Eye Productions, which is a double header event. We have 3 speakers, a panel, like 5 8-foot tables filled with UFO books as a browsing library. Really cool stuff.
So you were doing not only the content presentation, you're actually doing the show as well.
Yep.
Leah Haley, which we had talked about was it last week or the week before? I can't remember. Time is a.
I know, it goes by quickly, doesn't it?
So basically, the 90s. No wonder you were a little bit freaked out, because that's before Ancient Aliens. That's before the regional convention.
That's before, back when
that's before
the internet
the stuff
was
in the desert.
BBS.
Yeah, exactly. That's before Contact in the Desert.
That's way before.
That's way before all that. Well, now you're really dating yourself.
Yes. Yeah.
So no wonder you were freaked out, because the research shows.
I'm going to be here in about 5 minutes to pick myself up to go to the movie. So that's because I'm dating myself. But I'm pumped.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, let's get back to what you're really good at, which is UFO research. Okay. Yes.
No, this was a passion that I had. I started a group at the University of Kansas.
Yep.
And it turned into Third Eye Productions. And I was dating a girl that said that she was an abductee, and I thought she was just trying to please me because I was into UFOs.
Whoa. First of all, red flag. Dating any girl that you think might actually want to please you because you were into abductees. Wow, that's
It sounds strange.
Yikes. Was she
But
Puerto Rican?
sometimes
No.
truth is stranger than fiction. So
Okay.
apparently she saw on her uncle's bookshelf, she saw the cover of Communion, and she freaked. And anyway, she had me take her to Kansas City to go to see Dr. Fowler Jones, who was the guy regionally that did hypnotic regression for abductees, so that they could remember what was past the screen memories.
Right.
And she didn't tell me a single thing that happened that she remembered that came out, which I respected, but I was very surprised because I drove her there every week. But helicopter activity, very strange. I remember, we were staying in a basement apartment below her mom's house, and we're getting ready to go to bed, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, there's this like a helicopter's hovering over the house, but it didn't fade in, and when it was gone, it didn't fade out. It was just chicka 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 chicka. And then there was a time I was driving down one of the main drags here in Lawrence 6th Street, and I saw a white helicopter pacing me. It was going the same speed that I was, and I was going like down to 25, 30 miles an hour in my car. And I looked over and I noticed this helicopter was flying backward, and it had no rotors.
What?
Yeah.
Then that's not a helicopter then.
Not really, but it was obviously disguising itself as one. Another interesting thing that happened at the University of Kansas, there's, the Memorial Stadium where they play football, and then there's a hill, and my girlfriend at the time worked at Wild Oats, which has now been consumed by Amazon. And
Is it the same girlfriend or a different one?
Same girlfriend. No,
Okay.
all this stuff happened with this one girlfriend.
Okay.
Because she was an alien abductee.
Okay.
And so there was no way that a helicopter could get down into this little area. But so I'm at Wild Oats. They have a big, bay glass window. And I'm looking out, waiting for her to get off work. And this helicopter peeks over this little hill where there's no possible way it could fit.
Okay.
And its nose looked right at me. And I was like, what? And, one of those Jackie Chan moments. Oh, and,
okay.
And then it went right back down, and it freaked me out. And I've got even more strange tales to tell. But Mexican alien man, how about you?
Well, my experiences were a little bit more vanilla. Well, I've had two experiences, two different types of experiences, and they're way far apart. And certainly nothing like an abductee. Well, getting into the studio today, you can see that clearly we need to do some cleaning out in the driveway because there were some alien nanobots that clearly got to inside my suit, and they changed my DNA. And this is the second time it's happened, Cardinal Sin.
It's driving me crazy.
I go down to Xanadu, but nothing happens down there. I go to Cardinal Sin's lair, and golly, he's got nanobots. But then again, I'm sure there's advanced technologies. All right, so here's my two stories. I've never done this before in the air. All right, so one was when I was a lot younger. I was riding my bike out by the Hellier, what we call the Hellier Park out here in Silicon Valley. And back then, it wasn't really developed. Now there's houses everywhere, but it wasn't really developed. A lot of groves, A lot of like orange groves
Now,
and pears.
we're not
and-
talking about Hellier, like the place in the
no, no,
TV
this is
show.
no, this is a park in San Jose, California. Okay,
Okay.
and it's a valley. It's the south side, Santa Clara County, away from a lot of the buildings. A lot of dirt, bike paths, dirt, hiking areas, and all that. And I'd been gone like pretty much half the day. I would just take off. House was kind of explosive as a youth. We'll just say that. So I would take off, and I was gone half the day. I'd make my own lunch, and all that stuff. So I'm sitting there, and on one of the hills, and I see something like go by that's silver and round. And it just kind of, in a blink of an eye. I thought it was just,
It was silver and it was round.
silver and round, ovalish, and it just boom by. I was facing down, to eat my sandwich and stuff, and then just by the side of the corner of my eye. So I got on my bike and I took off, and I said I got to the top of the hill, stuff like that. I'm sitting there and I'm waiting an hour, and nothing happens, and then I started reading. I have my backpack with me, so sometimes I just stand at the top and read. And then now dawn's coming. Then way off in the distance, about 3 hills away, I see this thing come back again. It's frozen about, I don't know, maybe like 20 yards off the hill down there. And then I see it, and I'm not sure if it was to this day, I don't know if it's the dusk or the color of the sun going down, but I don't think so because it was radiating. And I see what I thought was one silver and white turn into red, then orange, then a goldish color over the span of about 2.5 minutes. And it didn't move at all.
That's a UFO.
And the weirdest thing is I looked away because I didn't have a camera, I didn't have a cell phone. It was like, God, I don't know what year it was,
73 or
1847.
18, yeah.
Mexican Iron Man is exactly
Steam
spring
engine
chicken. Yeah, not exactly spring chicken. I can't remember what year it was. I was about 11, though. 11, maybe. No, yeah, it was 11. Yeah, it was 11. But I remember this vividly, like as if it happened like yesterday, because it was so engaging, so different than anything you'd ever seen before. And, I could feel my mind trying to explain it away, like, oh, that must be a plane that's frozen? No, your head just starts going real fast. Yep. And, I never told anyone in my family about it. I told a couple of my buddies about it, like at school, like the following, they thought I was crazy and they made fun of me and all that. So I pretty much kept it to myself. And then that was it for a long time. That was the only experience. But it was vivid. It was like so vivid. And the weirdest thing is I've always worn glasses, but for some reason at that moment, the clarity was just unbelievable. And the colors that were radiating off of it were just amazing. And it was quiet, just dead silent quiet. And it was far enough away that I couldn't really make out a lot, but it's close enough that I should have been able to hear something. Like, if you're on the highway and you see the helicopters coming to do traffic.
Sure.
Oh, you hear those suckers like a good quarter, half mile out.
Yeah.
Especially when there's lots of traffic because, no one's moving, on the ground. So, this is a real remote area at the time. And so it's not like I could write down and say, hey, did you guys see that? And, and I don't know. So that was one. The other one, maybe, I think I'm going to save it for the next break. The other one is way more intense and obscure, but I'm going to save it for the next break.
But I want to go into one quick other one because you mentioned that you were young.
Yeah.
When I was 8 years old, my dad had given me 30x binoculars.
Oh.
So because I was really into astronomy, he got me into astronomy when I was a really young kid, like when I was 6 years old. And so I'm staring at the Pleiades with these 30x binoculars, astronomical grade binoculars, and I would never have seen this if I weren't looking directly at this constellation. But from left to right, this diamond-shaped, the only reason I could see it was because of the lights. It had 7 lights on it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah. 8.
Well, you're close enough. You actually count the lights.
I was looking through the binoculars, and so this thing goes just across the field, exactly where I happened to be looking. What are the chances? So I ran in to the house because my brother is almost 10 years older than I am.
Okay.
And I'm like, dude, I saw a UFO. Come check it out. And he's like watching football or something on the TV, and he's like, it's probably a U-2 spy plane. And I didn't think of this until later, but later I thought, why would a U-2 spy plane be flying over Kansas with its running lights on? And why would it be in the shape of a diamond?
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense.
And I'm going to say it a
So-
different way. And you know, I mean, it's in White Kansas. No offense, but I
Exactly.
mean, White Kansas.
I mean, it's got to get from point A to point B, I suppose, but you're not supposed to be able to see a U-2 spy plane.
No.
Even
no.
with binoculars, they're like
No.
100,000 feet up.
Yeah.
So, this was definitely my first UFO sighting, and I had many more, which we'll go into in the next break.
Many more?
Oh, yes.
Oh, maybe we should have had this conversation before you interviewed me for this thing here, buddy. I mean, we've already had genetic material here that's infiltrated. I don't know. All right, here we go. Now we go to the next screen. We call it the second segment.
Yep. Segment
All right.
number 2.
We're like the heir apparent to like coast to coast, but we'll be like Mexican to white dude. That'll be our show.
Once we figure out how to actually get the channel working, yes, we will. We will search. The information is great.
Dude, your library is just ridiculous.
I know. I happen to have a lot of stuff, you know, because I was really into it. One thing actually that Marc Davenport told me was that he thought that I was also an abductee, and I kind of poo-pooed him at the time, and then I had all these experiences when I was dating this girl who was an abductee, and I was, you know, I experienced a lot of very bizarre shit.
What about memory loss? What about time phases of time?
Well,
that you don't
we'll
remember
get
now?
to that at the next break.
But
Later, I saw Mark at another event in Nebraska.
Okay.
And I went up to him and I said, "How did you know?" And he said, "Gil, you just have that haunted look about you." And that,
more information that would have been helpful at the first interview
yes,
for Mexican Iron Man's due diligence.
yeah. But,
Okay. All right, Mexican Iron Man stepping back away from the controls and getting the tape ready for the people in chat. All right, here we go.
Let's do it. Oh, before we do,
Yes, sir.
I would like to make some. Yes, Chris Persia, no rotors at all. Rex Smith, it is interesting. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Mark Loseth, appreciate everybody hanging out while we were trying to get everything going on, and we really appreciate you hanging in here. You guys are going to have a really good time. The stuff that's coming up is legendary. So,
Don't start telling it because you. Oh yeah.
I'm not. I'm just saying this is.
I'm just going to say this. I've seen everything on TV. I've read everything. I'm incredibly well versed. And when you let me get a sneak peek into what's coming in the rest of the year, holy moly, I'm completely blown away. And by the way, bro, don't worry, because listen, the first 4 or 5 of these we did at Echo Base, they were way worse than this. So trust me.
Well, at least they could find their way into a StreamYard.
Well, you know, you weren't there for all of them. There's some, there's some untold mysteries.
You shot so many links at me. I'm like, which one is which?
All right, here we go, everybody. Here we go.
Yeah.
That leaves out all of Billy Meyer's photos. I don't know if you're familiar with them or not, but if you're not, you should see the photos. He has a lot of photos that are as clear as this or more clear. Steven Spielberg has looked at some of his photos and said, yes, we can reproduce those. It'll cost about $50,000 a shot to do it. And they're made by a one-armed farmer. This particular one is not. This is gun camera film. Yeah, he's a one-armed farmer, and he's poor, and he lives out in Switzerland by himself. He goes out in the woods on a motorcycle and shoots these things.
And when he says he could make them for $50,000, Steven Spielberg, he means
this
the
particular one
outside.
is not
He
one
doesn't
of
mean
Myers.
the
This was gun
crap.
camera film from an Air Force plane. It was taken in 1966 by Air Force personnel. And I had lots of them put away in different places in case one of the Air Force people was to come and take this one. I have a lot of copies of it. Finally, a lot of them assume that all things metaphysical and spiritual had to throw them out. I mentioned that once before.
I think that's a mistake. They're still doing that. Donald Ware was recently asked to leave the board of directors of the Mutual UFO Network because he was trying to convince the other board members that the human spirit and the channeling, that these people who say they're channeling information from up there somewhere, he was trying to convince them that that is worthy of scientific study. They said, no, it's not. We don't want to listen to it. So they fired him. And this is typical of the way people have thought. So we got to think bigger. We've got to think bigger than we've been thinking. Because what these people were doing by arbitrarily eliminating data like this was they were trying to put a jigsaw puzzle together after throwing away all those square-sided pieces. Have you ever tried to do that? Kind of like trying to study nuclear engineering before you take arithmetic. And I'm going to talk a little bit about another thing that is kind of like that too. Everyone was collecting anecdotal data. Everyone was going out into the field and collecting page after page after page of documentation, photographs, measurements, soil samples, and they were bringing them back and putting them into file cabinets, and nobody was looking at them. At least this is the way it appeared to me at the time. Nobody was analyzing that data. We had mountains of data, and nobody was really looking at it to see what conclusions they could draw. Everybody was concentrating on three big questions. Next slide. Who are they? Next. Where do they come from? Next. Why are they here? Three big questions. Everybody was concentrating on that. Nobody was concentrating on the little questions, the prerequisite questions, as I consider them. How are they able to travel at 40,000 miles an hour right through our atmosphere without burning up, without making any noise, without breaking up? And how can they, at speeds like that, suddenly turn 180 degrees instantaneously without just becoming rubble? And how could pilots be inside these things when they do that without just turning to bloody pulp? If we tried to do that with any of our stuff, the machinery would not survive. How are they able to hover noiselessly, without any sound at all, without any air currents, without disturbing leaves or anything else, and then just shoot off at 100,000 miles an hour or something so fast that we can't even detect it? In other words, it makes a streak on a single film. And I'll show you some films later here. Well, Tom showed you a slide where there were three separate images on one shot of film. And the film was shot at something like 1/250th of a second. So how can they do this? How can they materialize and disappear and change shape? Next slide. This is one frame of a video camcorder. And the next slide, that's the next frame. I mean, I don't know how fast that is. It's a fraction of a second. It's changed from a double image into a single image in that amount of time. Also, how are they able to radiate electromagnetic radiation of all different frequencies? We're talking about the full range of frequencies, from the lowest frequency of radio waves up through microwaves and heat and light of all different colors and ultraviolet and X-rays and gamma rays, the full range. We have measured these radiations coming from the hulls of these ships. Now they do often have lights where they shine lights, and you can see lights of different colors coming from actual what appear to be light fixtures, like the headlights of your car. But they also radiate these things from the hulls of their ships. How do they do that? How do they accomplish that? Why are good close-up photographs so rare? I showed you a photo that was pretty good though there, but most photos, next slide, most photos are like this. Well, it could be anything. It could be a bird, a fat bird, but a bird. Very few of them are like this one that I showed you. The next slide. The next slide. Very few of them are this clear. So why is that? Why is it so hard? Tom talked about a lot of people who have cameras and are there and they don't take the pictures. But there are also an awful lot of pictures that are taken, people are this close, and they snap a picture, and when they get home and develop the film, they either have a blob, or they have nothing, or they have something that doesn't look anything like what they saw with their eyes. Why are they sometimes seen on radar and not visually? There have been instances where pilots have said, I see a UFO. They call the tower and say, I've got a bogey up here right in front of me. And the tower says, sorry, I don't see it. And they say, well, it's only 50 feet in front of me, but I don't see it. And then the UFO will wink out, and the pilot says, uh-oh, I lost it. And the tower says, now we've got it. It's 50 feet in front of you. So how is it that they're able to do this? They either are there or they're not, right? Well, maybe not. And also, why the government cover-up? So not answering these little questions first is, as I say, like trying to study nuclear physics without taking arithmetic first. It appeared to me that also ufologists were subconsciously restricting their thinking. Everybody had a pet theory. One guy says that these things are all from planet X. And another guy says, no, these are from the hollow of the earth, from the inside of the earth. Another guy says, well, they're all from some other dimension. And somebody else says, no, they're all angels, or they're demons, or they're atmospheric animals, or they're earthquake lights. And so they would all collect data that would support their own theory. And they would say, see all this data? This is my theory. This is what they are. But if you say, well, what about all these other ones? They say, oh, I don't know about those other ones. So nobody seemed to be saying, nobody seemed to be saying that some of them are from Planet X. In this case, Planet X is Mars. That's a face on Mars there. That's a NASA photo. And others are from Planet Y. And others are from 100,000 or a million or a billion other planets and other dimensions, and some of them might be angels and so on and so forth. In other words, the phenomenon may be so complex that it's made up of lots and lots and lots of different phenomena. And I believe that's what we're looking at here. Even after you separate out all the hoaxes and misperceptions of common objects and hallucinations and everything, you're left with data that indicates that there's more than one phenomenon. Also, people were ignoring obvious patterns. Next slide. Most of the occupants were humanoid, as I said. I get a lot of these. People send me these in the mail all the time. This particular one is interpreted as a dream. A lot of people paint similar or draw similar things for me, and they say it's not a dream. They recall it consciously. This may turn out not to be a dream after hypnosis, but as you see, even though there are lots of different creatures here, they're all humanoid. They all have 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 eyes, 1 head, everything. They're humanoid. That's a pattern. Another pattern is when we track UFOs on film, when people see them traveling at night and they see the lights, and when they're doing these violent maneuvers, when they make a 180-degree turn, quite often there will be a color change. So they'll be coming along, they're green, and they make this turn, and then they're yellow, or they're blue, or red. Another pattern I think that's been overlooked, the so-called electromagnetic effects. They stop cars. They can fly over your car, and your car just goes dead. They can power fail cities. They can make equipment stop working when they fly over. Also, occupants are often asked questions like, what time is it? What is time? What is your time? What is a year? What is age? As if they don't know what time is. And time is often distorted in or near UFOs. People are often taken for rides that last an hour, and when they come back, they find out that 5 days have passed. Now, how does this happen? Clocks and watches are often stopped when they're in the vicinity of a UFO, or when people wear their watch inside the UFO and they come back. Clocks can stop. They can run backwards. They can jump ahead, way far ahead in time. There's something wrong with time here. So when I put these 3 big questions aside, that who are they, why are they here, and where are they from? When I put those aside and started looking at the little questions, I came up with what I believe is a simple, single, testable hypothesis that can explain just about all of these things. Next slide. and this is where I put it. And it's for sale over here if you want to look at it. First, I looked at the electromagnetic, so-called electromagnetic effects. You're driving in your car late at night, you're way out in the middle of nowhere, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, and you see this light, and it starts following you. And you don't think anything of it until it gets closer, and it's still following you. And it's not flying like an airplane, it's funny. And it comes still closer, and your headlights start to dim. And the thing comes and lands in front of you, and before you can do anything, your engine quits, and your radio goes off, and you're sitting there, and your car is dead, and you're sitting there with your mouth open, looking at a flying saucer in the road underneath. Now, this happens quite often. These things have the ability to power fail not only cars, but machinery. There's a case where in Kuwait, a long time before Desert Storm, the automatic oil pumping equipment went off when one of these things flew over. And the equipment just was dead, the oil stopped flowing. This happens lots of times. In South America, there have been many cases where a UFO has flown over and the whole city, all the lights in the city went out. If you saw the movie Close Encounters, we saw a representation of this. Now, the common theory, up until recently, the common theory to explain that is that these UFOs are just big magnets, and they're revolving. And the reason they're revolving is they're spinning is to keep them from flipping over and coming down. And people think that maybe they travel along the Earth's magnetic lines of force. But I have a problem with that, because tests have been done. To begin with, the car bodies would actually be bent. If you had a magnet strong enough to do that, to stop your car and turn your lights off for any length of time, the metal would actually be bent. It would have residual magnetism left in it that you could detect later. You'd be able to take a magnetometer and go up there and you could take a compass and go up next to the thing and the compass would just go crazy. Electrical components would be blown out. Any car that had this field close enough to it to stop the engine and turn the lights off, the radio would just be fried. The little field effect transistors and integrated circuits, but we don't find that. And we don't find bent metal in the cars, and we don't find residual magnetism. But the most important thing is the car would not start by itself when the UFO left. And they do sometimes. Sometimes when people are sitting there with their mouths still open, the thing will leave, and the car will come back on by itself. And if it's still in gear, sometimes they'll even start down the highway again, and the person has to grab a hold of the steering wheel. The oil pumping equipment I mentioned a while ago, that came on by itself, even though it is designed to not be able to start it by itself for safety reasons. People have to go, as technicians, several of them, have to go to different places and turn switches on manually to start it again. Nevertheless, when the UFO left, the equipment came on by itself and the oil pumping. The South American cases I told you about, where the power grid, the whole power grid went on, came on by itself. But the people at the power company are scratching their heads because they don't know how that could happen. Because once again, the system is designed, once it goes off, that it has to be restarted manually from several different places. And not only did they not restart it, but none of the fuses blew. And they couldn't figure out how that happened, because if you had the power off for any length of time in a certain place, and it came back on without being restarted manually, they knew for sure that it would blow the fuses, but it didn't. So maybe the temporal anomalies that have been reported and the UFO occupants' preoccupation with time, asking all these questions about time, maybe those are clues, and maybe the assumption that these are electromagnetic effects is the wrong assumption. Maybe they are temporal, time effects. Now I'm going to give you a physics lesson, so try not to go to sleep here. I always did when people told me stuff like this. According to the theory of relativity, this is Albert Einstein came up with this in 1905. Space and time are interdependent, and together they form a four-dimensional continuum that we call space-time.
I'm going to hit pause right there real quick, because this is an important juncture. We've gone from, in the first segment, and even in his first part of his segment, talking about different things that have happened, different pictures, different evidence. Now he's about to get into, which is the basis of his book, which is like, what's really happening in terms of time, space? How are these people getting here? Where are they going? Because there's all these reports that they're like in and they're out. And what he's going to talk about was the substance of his book, which I believe had at least a couple of editions released of it. He was the first guy.
This is the second edition.
Pull it out. Let's show it to the people, because this is where things are going to get real interesting real fast.
That's the second edition.
So. At least I think so. We'll do this right here.
And it has blurbs on the back by legendary researchers like John Keel, Raymond Fowler, Leo Sprinkle,
the OGs.
PhD. I mean, this is hard.
Those are all the OGs.
These are people that you know, to get one blurb on the back of your book would be amazing.
Yeah.
To get all of these, you know,
it's amazing because of the UFO
the
community.
book has to be really good.
Yeah, almost no 2 or 3 of them ever agree on anything.
That's true too.
That's why they all if you go to any of the UFO events, that's why they all almost the only one that seems to get a lot of friends is Von what's his face, the Ancient Aliens guy, the one from.
By the way, here is a keepsake ticket for this very event.
What? Wait, hold on. Let me get you back here. Wait, do it again. You actually have your ticket from back then when you produced the event?
I have a ton of these.
All right. Well, you just put that in Mr. Mexican Iron Man's like inbox in an envelope.
Yeah, I'll put it in that special envelope that.
My nanobots don't freaking
Also,
right, so
while we're at it, I wanted to share this with you.
Okay.
This is dated 5/11/95. Dear Gil, Leah and I just wanted to thank you again for bringing us to Lawrence. We also talk about other aspects of the phenomenon, and we'll be happy to come back again. Mark, Leah.
What?
Yeah.
He actually took the time to write you a card?
Yep.
Van Daniken. Yeah, Rex, I don't know how his name is spelled either. I should know this. God,
Not just a postcard either.
It's criminal.
A letter.
Well, you know what? Here's the thing. I think I'm now learning something about you, Cardinal, that now I realize what you were really doing.
And another one.
You were providing a rare forum for them to bring their books to life back before all the conventions and all this, all the.
That's true. Yeah.
And you didn't even realize like you're really paving. I mean,
and
at one level. Go ahead.
Greenleaf Publications was their company, and they sold
That's
books.
legit.
Yeah. They sold.
Wow.
They sold UFO books. They sold theirs, and they sold others. And Contact Forum was a roundtable for experiencers and abductees to, communicate and support each other. And this stuff
is good stuff.
Goes back a long way, and it has an emotional, resonance for me personally.
Well, I think one of the things that's going to be great, Carmen, and I got a sense of this about you, last couple of weeks, is that by you having these items that have meant so much, and you building a community with guys like Chris and Mark and Rex, and there's only about a half dozen of us today, but you know what? That's how we started Echo Base, okay? And so, and a couple other channels. So, I think the neat thing is by you being able to give rare items to us, I think that's going to mean that much more for you. I know it means a lot for me. I mean, I'll tell you, some of these videos that we're going to be presenting in the coming months.
I just think it's fun.
I mean, I can't believe I'm watching a video. Mark, I must have read his book, I don't even know how many times. 4 or 5?
Where else is there on the internet, anywhere, a lecture of Marc Davenport?
There isn't.
I have 2.
So he's going to get into now, let's go back to the tape now, because now he's going to get into something that we hear all the time nowadays in the last few years, but, everybody's buying into it and blah, blah, blah.
But at the time, it was groundbreaking. People thought he was nuts, way out on the left wing.
But if you read the book,
it makes a lot of sense.
It makes a lot of sense. Here we go. Let's roll it.
And the presence of matter warps the space-time continuum. Now, the more mass is involved, the greater the curvature, the greater the warping of space-time. Now, when we have something that's called a black hole, this is a star that's collapsed in on itself, and the mass is so great that a teaspoon full of it weighs 1 billion tons. When we have something that's that massive, it can actually warp space-time inside out, turn it clearly inside out, and so that time runs backwards in this area that's called a singularity, black hole. Now what I propose is that these UFOs, we know that these things possess a technology that's much higher than ours. They're much more advanced than anything that we have. What I propose is that their technology is so advanced that they have figured out how to produce the same effect that a black hole produces. They have figured out how to warp space-time inside out without breaking up or having their ship torn into individual atoms or anything else. They have some kind of a generator that produces a field around their ship that warps space-time so that inside that field, inside their own private little bubble, their own private little universe, the laws of physics are not the same as they are in our universe. They're never actually in our universe. They're in their own little private one. So that when they're traveling through the sky, and they look to us like they're traveling at 40,000 miles an hour, they may only be traveling at 40 miles an hour to them. The space-time that they're in is not the same space-time that we're in. That's what I'm proposing. If that's the case, if they can produce this field, and maybe they don't have a machine, maybe some of these people are so advanced that they can do this with their minds. It's possible. I mean, we know about telekinesis. We know that certain people are able to make little aluminum foil things spin with their minds or move cigarette ashes. That's been tested. They've done tests at Stanford and Princeton and other places. Maybe these people are so advanced they can do it with their minds. I think we have evidence that they have some kind of technology, some kind of machine, some kind of generator that can do it. And maybe their time inside their field is running at right angles to ours, so that a second is equal to one of our hours, or even a millisecond is equal to one of our years. And if this is the case, and that field gets close to our cars, maybe it isn't that the electricity is turned off or anything like that. Maybe it's just slowed down to the point where it doesn't work anymore.
Visitors from time.
And if that's the case, wouldn't the car return to normal after the thing left? I mean, provided that all other factors are the same, provided that all the conditions are right. See, we think of time as a river. We think of time as flowing inexorably from the past through the present into the future, and we're like corks in that river, and then we're going to go there no matter what, and there's nothing we can do about it. But the quantum physicists have been telling us, at least since 1980, that that's not the way it is at all. According to them, the flow of time is an artifact of our consciousness. Let me give you some quotes here. This is from Dr. Paul Davies, who is a professor of theoretical physics at the University of Newcastle upon Tyne, England, a lecturer in applied mathematics at King's College, University of London, and a visiting fellow at the Institute of Astronomy, Cambridge, England.
Newcastle upon Tyne.
In other words, this guy is no slouch. In a book called Other Worlds, published by Simon & Schuster in 1980, he writes, and I quote, "There seems to be no strong reason for supposing that the flow of time is any more than an illusion produced by the brain processes similar to the perception of rotation during dizziness." In other words, it's our own brain that's creating the illusion of the passage of time. He goes on to write, "The concept of elastic time was quite a shock when Einstein introduced it in 1905, but since then many experiments have confirmed its reality. A good check on the effect was made at CERN in Geneva in early 1977. It confirmed the amount of time dilation predicted by the theory of relativity to an accuracy of 0.2%. One intriguing possibility opened up by the time dilation effect is time travel. By approaching closer and closer to the speed of light, an astronaut can dislocate his time scale more and more violently relative to the rest of the universe. For example, rocketing to within 100 miles per hour of the speed of light, which is 186,000 miles per hour, he can accomplish a journey to the nearest star in less than 1 day, though the same journey measured from Earth takes over 4 years. His clock rate is thus about 1,800 times slower than when observed from Earth, than when observed from the rocket." He goes on to say, time dilation is definitely science fact. Next slide, please. In this book, Dr. Fred Alan Wolf, who is another highly respected physicist, He published this in 1988 by Universe Seminars, later by Simon & Schuster, as you see here. Dr. Wolf says, as strange as it appears at first glance, time machines, devices that enable a conscious being to travel in time backward and forward, must be constructible if parallel worlds exist. He says, assuming that the general theory of relativity is correct, then time machines and parallel universes must exist. Massive objects confined to small regions of space produce curves in space-time. Curving space-time introduces gravitational distortion, and such distortion creates parallel universes and time machines. Time machines can be constructed consistent with the laws of quantum physics and general relativity, provided parallel universes indeed exist. The existence of parallel universes, those that appear as a result of the observance of any physical system according to the quantum rules, makes it possible to communicate with both the past and the future through the actions of a quantum wave of probability. It turns out this wave can travel forward and backward in time. Now, a translation of that. Quantum physics, which is the new physics that the theoretical physicists are studying in the laboratory right now, tells us that when we observe something, what we observe affects not only the future, but also the past. When we see something, when we decide something, it affects the future and the past. Time is not what we think it is at all. It is our consciousness. It is the way we think that creates the flow of time. So time travel is possible, and we will learn how to do it at some time in the future.
Which Eastern philosophy has been saying for thousands of years.
About what aspect, sir? What were you saying? What were you commenting on?
That time is not a river that inexorably flows from one, region to the other, from the past to the future. That it's all about consciousness. That time is a construct of the Western human mind. That, if you go back to the Mahabharata and these very, very old, tens of thousands of years old,
which we're going to get into later in the year.
Yes, absolutely. These are things that they understood 10,000 years before Christ.
Yeah. All right, here he goes.
But we're a ways from that now. We don't quite know how this all works yet, but somebody else apparently does. Carol Alley, Oleg Jakubowicz, and William Wicks verified the existence of backward through time travel at the University of Maryland in 1985 when they performed their famous photon experiments. You can read about that in this book. Excuse me. Dr. Frank Tipler, who is professor of physics and mathematics at Tulane University, described how to build a working time machine. Now, the way he described it was you have to take a bunch of rotating neutron stars and stick them together. Well, we don't know how to do that. We don't have any tools that big yet. I don't think Craftsman sells anything that we can do that with. But nevertheless, he described mathematically what the effects would be if we could do that. And he has proven mathematically that you can travel backwards and forwards through time. Next slide. Could fields that warp space-time explain other possible things that UFOs do? We talked about the speed. They can travel so fast. Well, maybe they're not traveling so fast. It's just that we think they are because we're looking through some kind of a field into a different little universe. The aerobatics. They can also materialize on the spot. There have been many cases where people have just been standing there and one of these things just forms in front of them. A UFO forms there, and you think, well, that's got to be a hologram or something. It's not real. And then the thing lands and it presses big holes in the pavement. And then people get out of it and take people aboard and they undergo procedures and they're operated on. And after they get out, the thing takes off. It breaks tree branches. Tom showed you some pictures of that. It sets the pavement on fire or the grass or whatever else is there. So if this is a hologram, it's pretty physical for a hologram. People go in and wrap their knuckles on the tables in there. Next photo. This is one of Billy Meyer's photos. I told you about him. You see how on your right, this thing is not exactly symmetrical. It looks like it's kind of warped a little bit. Well, a lot of people thought that was evidence that this photograph was a fake, that he had thrown some kind of a model up and photographed it, and that was an error. But I don't think so. I think it may be evidence that photograph is real, because I think what you may be seeing there is part of that warping in space-time. I'm going to show you some more of that later, some videotape.
Look at that.
I talked about these things are able to give off all frequencies of electromagnetic radiation. Now, how can they do that? Assuming that they can warp space-time, how is it that they're able to do that? So I want to talk about something called the Doppler Effect. And I want to play a tape for you. It's really short.
Wow, he's going to play
It won't take long. This is at a racetrack. You notice how when the car is coming toward you, the sound is high-pitched, very high-pitched. And just as it passes you, the sound immediately becomes low-pitched. If you've ever been to a racetrack or been to a highway, you've heard this. Did you ever wonder why that was? No, stop. Okay. The reason for that is sound is emitted in waves like this. We call them sinusoidal waves, just like the waves on an ocean. Now, it's the distance between one peak and the next peak of one of those waves. That is what determines the pitch of a sound. The closer together they are, the higher the pitch. When the thing is coming toward you, between the time it emits one peak and the time it emits the next peak, it's moved. So that has the effect of compressing those waves and making them closer together. They're higher energy waves. As it's moving away from you, it emits one peak, and then a valley, and then as it's moving away, it emits another peak, but it's moved in between, so it has the effect of stretching those waves out. Okay, now sound is not the only wave that is affected this way. Electromagnetic waves are also affected this way. And that includes all electromagnetic waves are exactly the same except for their wavelength. Radio waves can have a wavelength from one peak to the next, can be thousands of miles between them. On the other end of the spectrum, you go up through what we call radio waves and microwaves and infrared, visible light, which is a tiny little portion of the electromagnetic spectrum right in the middle, and then ultraviolet, and then X-rays, and then gamma rays. All these waves are exactly the same, except radio waves are 1,000 miles in between them, maybe, or somewhere in there. Gamma rays, there's trillions of them per inch for very high energy. And that's the only difference between them. So if you can change the wavelength, let's say heat is just below visible light on the electromagnetic spectrum. So if you could increase the wavelength of the heat, it would become visible light. As a matter of fact, our scientists, the astronomers, the way they tell how fast something is moving away from us, other galaxies are moving away from us at something like half the speed of light, very, very quickly. The astronomers can tell how fast they're moving away by measuring what they call the redshift, the Doppler effect, but by measuring how the light is stretched out. Those waves are stretched out. And they can tell that. In fact, there's Dr. William G. Tift of the University of Arizona has even found out recently that the redshift has jumps. In other words, as you go out a certain distance from the Earth, there will be a certain amount of redshift. And when you get to a certain place out there, there'll be a jump and there'll be a whole lot more redshift. And then you'll get to another place and there'll be a jump and there'll be a whole lot more. It's in quanta, just like the shells of an electron. So the universe we're finding out is not what we thought it was at all. Just as the scientists in the 1800s said, oh, no, there can't be any such thing as meteorites, as meteors, because everybody knows there aren't any stones in the sky, so how can they fall from the sky? And we're finding out that what we know about the universe now may be just as backward as that was then. So,
I want to say this. What I love about Mark way back when, see now, you have a movie like Interstellar, you have a lot more has been done in terms of space matter, dark matter, and I mean, we're just not even 30 years away. We're light years of research and discovery. Here he is, open to the possibility of a variety of concepts, but certainly to put the flag in the ground and to letting the world know that, hey, we got to expand our minds because we don't know what it is, but he's always coming from a scientific perspective.
Mark was so far ahead of his time. It's not even funny.
That's what I'm saying.
If you can find a copy of Visitors from Time, The Secret of the UFOs, you must buy it. I don't know if you can even find a copy anymore, but it's a gripping read. It makes a lot of sense. And yeah, like Mexican Alien Man is saying, 30 years ago, this was flights of fancy. Now it's fact. Spooky action at a distance and all that kind of stuff. Nobody in modern physics gave that any credence.
Good God! Right now, avant-garde is multiple universes simultaneously. It's like
Star
Trek.
the many worlds theory. Yeah, and that's exactly where he's going. And
they're all trying to prove that right now, and he's just so far ahead. It's just unbelievable.
And one of the things that he was known for, that Marc Davenport was known for, was taking high-level scientific concepts and bringing them down to a level where the layman could understand it easily. And I think he does a great job of that, especially at a time when nobody understood this stuff. I don't even think Michio Kaku was talking about that then.
No, absolutely not. All right, here we go.
What I'm getting at here is the Doppler effect. If you're inside a field, if you've got a ship and you've produced this field that works space-time, and you're inside the field and somebody else is outside the field, then as radiation passes through that field, it's going to be Doppler. It's going to be changed in wavelength. Just like when you look in a creek and you see a fish, and the fish looks like he's down here, but he's really over there because the light is refracted. Well, the light coming from a UFO is going to be refracted as it goes through that field. So what we see is what is light after it comes out of that field. It may not be what was emitted inside the field at all. In other words, the shape of the ship that we see, this may not be what that thing looks like at all. What we're saying is what got through that field and turned into light of the right wavelength to stimulate our eyes. This could explain how they can disappear, how they can materialize, how they can change shape, because it isn't really the thing changing shape. It isn't the metal changing shape. It's what you see. In fact, we even think that at certain conditions, the field can actually bend the light around the thing so that you see what's behind it, and it could be sitting right in front of you and you wouldn't see it at all because the light is being bent around it. I hope I'm not losing you. So as I studied the existing literature with this hypothesis in mind, I found evidence everywhere. We had UFOs that were surrounded by glows, all different colors, mists. There were clouds that would form. A UFO would form inside of the cloud. We had UFOs that were seen with concentric rings around them. One guy had a pair of Polaroid glasses on. He looked up and saw this thing, and it had these black rings around it, just like this. He took the Polaroids off, and the thing didn't have the rings. He put it back on there, and they were. Some kind of a polarization effect was created by this field around the thing. There was a time when a UFO came down, or a bunch of people in a restaurant watching a forest fire. A UFO came down and landed in the forest fire. The flames went around it, never touched it, never even got close to it. The people got out of the thing, went and picked up rocks and sticks and everything, put them in bags, got back in the ship and left. They were never in any danger from the fire. The fire never got close to the ship. Invisible barriers like that have been seen on many occasions. In fact, witnesses have even gone up and leaned against these things. There was one guy who was walking up towards this thing slowly because he wasn't sure what it was. He walked up to it and then he realized, gee, I haven't been walking for a long time. And he realized that he was just kind of stuck in this thing. His nephew saw him and came running up to him and smacked into this field and it knocked him cold. And here they are 50 feet away from the ship. They're not even close to it. We have rocks, bullets, missiles, all sorts of things have been thrown at these things. And not only at the ships, but also at the beings themselves. Betty Andreasen, whom you may have heard, she saw one of these beings when she was a kid. She picked a rock up and threw it at him, and it just kind of slowed down and fell to the ground before it ever hit him. Carl Higdon was hunting elk out in Wyoming. He drew a bead on an elk and took a shot, and the bullet went out about 50 feet. It slowed to a stop and fell to the ground. They later found the bullet, found out that it could turn inside out. And the ballistics experts, sheriff and ballistic experts could not figure out what in the world had happened to that bullet. Well, right after that, he turned over here, and here's an alien being or some kind of a being, and a spaceship sitting beside him. He was taken inside this ship, and the ship was bigger on the inside than it was on the outside. And this happens frequently. There was a ship that was supposedly captured. A photographer, an Air Force photographer, was flown from Hawaii to California specifically to photograph the thing. He said it was about 30 feet in diameter. He went on the inside. He said, inside you could have thrown a football and not hit the other side. Now this is common. I hear this from lots of people who have been taken aboard these things. They say, it landed in my backyard, and their backyard's small. Landed in the backyard, they took me in it, and they took me upstairs and down this hall and down to this other room and then through this room to another room. You know, this thing is huge on the inside, but not on the outside. Well, how can that happen? Well, I think it can happen because I think it's not in our space-time. And I think that's also why they don't stay here very long, because I think it takes a tremendous amount of energy to maintain that field that keeps them here temporarily. We have cases where cars have gone up against these barriers and spun their wheels. If their headlights go out, that's okay. Sometimes their engines die, but sometimes they don't. And when they don't, the cars can be butted up against these fields and spinning their wheels and can't go any further. Next slide. This is a photograph that was taken. I'm not sure what the exposure was, but I know it was a tiny fraction of a second. And this is common. You see these things. This is a UFO photograph, and it's moving in a complex movement during that, whatever it is, 125th of a second that shutter is open. There's one from Australia that actually does a figure 8 in one frame of a movie film. We talked about this before. We have cases where people feel paralyzed. I told you about the guy who was no longer walking. Sometimes, if this ship comes down and lands quickly, the person will just be absolutely paralyzed for they don't even know how long. Sometimes there aren't even any thoughts moving in here. Equipment fails, not only cameras, guns, but oil pumps, TVs, cars, trucks, motorcycles, ships, bulldozers, generators, planes, helicopters. And people talk about, where is the physical evidence? Well, that's physical evidence. All of these things have been stopped in their tracks. And we have multiple witnesses to these things. We have the disappearance of ambient sand. You're out in your backyard and a UFO lands near you. Suddenly there's no crickets. You can't hear the cows mooing. There's no sounds on the highway. You can't hear the wind. You can't hear anything. I think it could be because the sound is actually Doppler out of the audible range. A 1962 case just came to light in the June 1993 MUFON UFO Journal. The occupants told a seminary student, quote, that noise in the vicinity was in an altered state of suspension and even time was altered. This is what the people aboard the thing told the guy, the witness. Objects float up from the ground. We have abductees who float up from the ground, sometimes through their walls. You've probably heard of the Linda Cortila case in New York, where the woman was floated out through her 12th-story Manhattan apartment window, or not through the open window, but through the glass, and taken into a ship. You've probably heard of the allegation abductions where 4 men were floated up from a canoe. The Washburn family in Australia, which one person was taking a photograph of another one, and during that time, before he could click the shutter, he was frozen in time. People were floated up from the beach into this craft and went through a long, involved abduction scenario and brought down. In between the time he clicked the shutter, During this, a lot of people feel weightless. They say it's like being in an elevator that's falling quickly. They can feel that they don't have any, gravity is abrogated. Their voices are even distorted. One case, the Knowles family in Australia, they were taken up in their car, and while they were taken up, of course, the woman is yelling at her son, to get out of here. And her voice was real high and screechy, like when you inhale helium. And she couldn't understand why. I said we had cars and trucks. There was one case where a guy is leading a horse by a bridle. UFO comes down, makes a pass, and turns away. And the horse is taken up into the air. The guy had to let go of the bridle because the horse is up in the air. I don't know whatever happened to that horse. I think they probably ate it. We have cases where dirt is when one of these things leaves suddenly instead of rising and then going away like they normally do. When they leave suddenly from the ground, sometimes they pull up craters of dirt, and inside the hole is wider at the bottom than it is at the top, and there's little rootlets hanging in there, completely undisturbed. All the dirt's out here. In some cases, there could be what they call earth cookies. There's a 20-foot section of dirt a foot deep, and it's laid over like this. We don't have any way to do that, but this happens with UFOs. How are we doing on time? Fine, okay. We have water that is affected. There's one case where a guy was out on a beach, and he saw the ocean start to bubble up like this, and there were colored lights coming up through this thing. And you can see all different colors, and the ocean just mounted up like this and went away, and it never was close to the ship. It was around like the fire. It was at some distance away from the ship. You could see the water dripping off like this, and the ship never got wet. It never touched the water. It had been under the ocean. It came up and then it flew away. This is a big thing, like 100 feet in diameter. Let's see here. The clocks, I talked about clock stopping. Now this is not only wristwatches and clocks that can be magnetized, not only electric clocks, but mechanical clocks, and even old antique brass clocks. There's one guy who had a whole collection of clocks, and there wasn't a piece of steel in it. It couldn't be magnetized. Nevertheless, every one of the clocks in his collection stopped. So I think it's a temporal effect, not an electromagnetic effect. Dr. Rem Varlamov, Dr. Rem Varlamov in Russia has been studying these things for years now, and he's taken to placing identical quartz timepieces inside and outside the landing sites, like the one Tom showed you. He finds that the ones inside the landing sites actually run faster than the ones outside. So there's some kind of a temporal effect that is actually residual. It stays there after the UFO is even gone. I talked about abductees that aged 5 days and 15 minutes. One case was a Chilean soldier. He left his group of men. It was at night. He saw a purple UFO, and he went towards this thing to challenge it, and he disappeared. His men didn't know what to do, so they just kind of stayed where they were. And 15 minutes later, this guy showed up again, but he had a 5-day growth of beard, and his calendar watch said it was 5 days later. I know it sounds crazy, but we have multiple witnesses to that. There was another case, a Chinese soldier. He was taken for a period of hours. Or no, he was taken for a period of days. And when he came back, he was old. He had a long white beard, and his memory was completely gone. We have speedometers that fluctuate. One guy was driving in a car with 2 other witnesses. His speedometer suddenly changed from 60 to 100 miles an hour, just like this. He looked outside. The scenery was going along just like it should. But nevertheless, he had this problem with his speedometer. He never had any trouble before or since, only when the UFO was there. Next slide. Oh, this is the allegation abductions. Things move in slow motion. There's one case where 3 boys were out in the woods somewhere, and they saw this landed UFO, and they were hesitant, but they got up enough courage to go up and tap on the thing with a flashlight. It moved or made some kind of noise, and it scared them, and they started to run away. And all 3 of the boys separately said, "We were running in slow motion," when they tried to run away from this thing. There's one case, a local gentleman was hunting. He was hunting quail, I believe, with a bird dog. The dog was out of him, and the dog started to move in slow motion. This dog wasn't just stalking game, he was moving in slow motion. They looked up, and up above the dog was a saucer. When the saucer left, the dog started moving normally. In the Bidwaters case, these were American soldiers who were waiting for a UFO to form. Someone knew where it was going to be and when. They had set up lights and cameras around this clearing, and they told these guys to wait there. And this thing formed right in front of their eyes, and it came and landed there. And as these guys are walking between the lights and the UFO, they would take a step, and then their shadows would take a step. Their shadows would cast on the UFO. And they would take another step, and then their shadows would take another step. So, obvious temporal anomaly. Speeding cars have been stopped within inches. There's one case where a guy was driving 70 miles an hour, and he sees this UFO, and he starts to veer over the center line. And before he knows what's happening, he's going to hit another car that's coming, its highway speeds the other direction. The other guy knew it too. They both closed their eyes. And when they woke up, one guy was sitting in his car, the other guy was standing outside his car. There were no skid marks. The cars were stopped within inches of each other. The UFO was gone. We had planes and helicopters moved around. Tom showed you the Commander Coyne case where the helicopter, Commander Coyne had thrown the collector in a down position as far as it would go to make that helicopter dive to avoid a collision with the UFO. Even though it was in the down position for several minutes, when the UFO finally left, they were 3,500 feet higher than they had been when the thing had started. They were inside some kind of a field. This has happened with airplanes. One man, a pilot flying alone, his airplane, suddenly all the engines quit. And it was this way for several minutes. Plenty of time for him to fall and hit the earth, but he didn't. He stayed at the same altitude the whole time. After the UFO left, his engines came back on and he flew normally. He was encased in some kind of field. Slide, please. You've all heard about the crop circles. Next slide. We've never really made the connection between crop circles and UFOs, even though we think there probably is one. But as you see, the grass is bent at the growth nodes. Now this can happen normally when there is no crop circle. This can happen, but it takes months to happen. In a crop circle, this is what happens. This is what lays the grass over, or corn or wheat or whatever it is. Apparently it grows faster on the outside of this bin than on the inside. It's kind of like the little plant, the Venus flytrap that catches flies. The way that thing closes on a fly is out here at the hinges, the cells actually grow fast enough to make it close. Well, that's how fast this stuff is growing in one of these crop circles. So, in other words, the growth is speeded up hundreds or thousands of times faster than normal. So, again, a temporal anomaly. Now, I want to show you a little bit of video.
Real quick before he finishes, he was the first one after this this topic where he started putting things together for people. That was almost like a little bit of a green light where some of the folks who really got into crop circles for the next 20 years took that as a blessing that they could jump in and go after it and research it. Now, regardless of what you think about it, wherever you are in the debate about the issue or not, we're going to cover that at another place. But you muted yourself. You mute yourself. Unmute yourself. Cardinal, you're muted. Oh, there you go. Yeah. Okay, so don't you agree with me from that perspective? Do you agree with what I'm saying there?
Can you hear me?
Here you go.
Yes. Yeah. There's the real crop circles and the fake crop circles.
Right.
Dan and Dave didn't make all the crop circles all over the world. They made a couple in Britain, maybe. But they didn't have armies of drunken British guys making these incredibly intense crop circles by microwave radiation at the nodes where these grasses and other crops would bend,
right?
Because they were superheated for just a moment, and
right.
that would make them grow faster on one side.
But they didn't know that in the beginning. That's why this topic got so weird for a few years, because they just said, okay, well, they're flat.
No idea.
Back then it was just about, is it flat and is there a pattern or not?
Yeah.
The analysis hadn't been done. And also, here's the other thing that happened. Google Maps didn't exist, and that really changed things because then you saw similar crop circle patterns in different places all over the world.
All over the world, and you
that
saw
was
the number of them.
because then it almost became apparent that Dave and what was that other guy? I can't remember his buddy's name.
Dave and Dan.
Yeah, then it became apparent that they were only doing patterns that they could pull off and get done.
They were smashing stuff down with a rope and a board in the middle of the night in a farmer's field.
Right, but it was
they weren't doing the incredible fractal art and stuff like that. That's impossible for you know.
That's the thing. That for a period, the testing hadn't come up yet quite then, in terms of like what's the radiological treatment.
But Marc Davenport was on top of it.
Well, he was at least throwing it out there because he was coming at it from the theoretical science standpoint and said, "Hey, look, this is what it is." All right, let's get back to the end of this thing. I'm sorry to interrupt it, but I just thought it was really. I just really wanted to chime in there because
it's important.
What Martin did here is he ended up giving birth to a whole other area of research.
Also, before we get back, I'm not sure if I was successfully able to share my screen, but there are used copies of Visitors from Time available from $5 to $10. So depending on how nice a copy you want, they are available out there.
Oh, okay. All right, brother. Here we go. Let's see what happens. Here we go.
Videotape. You've been watching that snow on that screen for a long time. Can we turn the slide off and show a little videotape here? How am I getting on time? I'm just going to show you a couple of minutes of this that's kind of stuck together. Then I'm going to go back and play it real slow. This is from Messengers of Destiny. I'll tell you about this in a minute.
And once more.
This is kind of a through New Age thing, but it's really.
I'm going to go back and show this slower.
And it appears to be floating, perhaps rotating on its own axis. Utilized to compare the segments taken from Mr. AE in Mexico City with a closer view, allowing us to see details previously obscured. This is not a star. It is not a balloon, nor is it a recognizable aircraft. It is indeed an a corona effect we have not seen before. At the Televisa Studios, the sixth level, some thought it was an unknown intelligence carrying out a scientific mission similar to what our scientists were doing at that same time, measuring and monitoring. If they were seen, so what? The Air Force and no one else would challenge them. Others believed it was indeed a fulfillment of the ancient prophecy.
Is excellent because usually you see detail, you can see the physical shapes, and you also see that I think I see here the disturbance on this side of the craft, indicating that the field generated by the craft are actually disturbing the space surrounding it. This is an analogous to the aircraft. For example, as the aircraft propellant rotates, it disturbs the air around it, causing swirls that they do not operate. There is a pulsation in the size and geometry of the object. And again, it is indicative of a repetitive cyclic plane that you expect for the field propulsion system. So one can see that there is strong energetic activity occurring throughout this region. But also you'll see a black body to nothing else. That is extremely interesting. This illustrates two things with respect to field propulsion. The phenomenon you see here would be indicative of the electric field propulsion system. For example, we call our electricity. This is actually caused by the motion of the magnetic field through the atmosphere with it. The color indicates that the different intensities of the field that surround the ship. The radiation pressure at the different regions throughout the ship. These characteristics of magnetic fields. So that one might speculate that the electromagnetic device is actually causing the pulsation formation of these fields. I think that this will put I'm known as a scientist that's trying to develop the advanced spaceships to have these kind of capabilities. And so this is very exciting to me. And I know that right now we do not know how to develop effective field propulsion systems. So we do believe we know enough to know what has to take place for effective field propulsion to be. And these craft and the signatures of them are exactly what we think an effective field propulsion craft would have. So we're very excited to people like myself because to tell us that
The audio's awful, but basically what he's commenting on is he's commenting like how unique and interesting are the flight characteristics. Is that correct?
The audio gets better.
I'm going to roll this back and tell you a little bit about the tape. Whoops. Am I rolling it back?
Oh my God!
I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. This tape was put out by Lee and Britt Elders. They have a company called Genesis 3. You can buy the tape. This is a videotape that was made in Mexico City on July 11th, 1991 during a solar...
End of segment 2. So we are in the home stretch, ladies and gentlemen.
Boy, I think we should save the rest. I think we should do the Q&A and the next part in a different segment. We're already at 2.5 hours right now.
I think the next segment's short. I think we should go ahead and power through it. And
all right, well, while I'm getting the next segment ready, why don't you talk and share your some perspectives to the folks, and also listen. Anybody's chat. I know there's only about let's say that there's 8 of you, maybe 4 or 5 of you actually. Say, why don't you throw some questions out of Cardinal Sin about some
sure, yeah, I'd be happy to answer.
I'm gonna need to queue the next one up. So let me do
questions
that right
now. And comments, things like that. I want to really thank you guys for.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Were all of your girlfriends abductees or just that one?
As far as I know, just that one.
I was kidding. It was a boom, bam. Okay, I'm not a good comedian either. All right, Mexican Iron Man. Yeah. Okay, I'll be right back.
But some really weird shit happened when I was with her. For instance, we heard very heavy breathing, like from a huge dog. Outside, the basement window. When you're in the basement, there's a window. You can't really get out of it, but if you've ever seen a basement window, you know what I'm talking about. And I said, shh, and I wanted to listen. And she started arguing with me, and I couldn't get her to shut up. I couldn't get her to be quiet so I could listen to what it was. And by the time, I got her to be quiet, it was gone. It was whatever it was doing. It was done. Very paranormal, very strange. Her mother, she said, told her that she used to see a giant frog at the edge of her bed. So big black eyes, about 3.5 feet, 4 feet tall. So this runs in families. This is something that if you are an abductee, your parents are probably abductees, your children will probably be abductees. And I realize that we're kind of going a little further afield from the UFO topic, but these are some of the things I experienced. I have seen numerous UFOs. I have the benefit of knowing I don't have to believe or be skeptical. I've seen them, not like up close where they land and come out and shake your hand or whatever, or do whatever they do. But the things that I experienced when she was probably taken away, very strange, very weird. The helicopters really got to me because I knew they weren't helicopters, but they looked like helicopters. It was a safe, familiar looking, excuse, not a reason, but you know what I mean? Something where I could blow it off if I didn't have an intensely curious mind that was intent on the scrutiny of why is this rotorless white helicopter flying backward and pacing me. Last year, or I guess in 2019, I was coming home from the grocery store, and I had 2 bags of groceries in my arm, so I couldn't put them down and grab the smartphone and take a photograph. But I saw what looked like planes, except they were bigger, and they were coming together and moving apart like lovebirds. And it was the sort of thing that if it had been planes, they would have been coming so close that they would have crashed. And there was no air show. It was 9:30 at night, in the middle of Lawrence, Kansas. And later I reflected on how incredibly absurd the sighting was. A lot of sightings seem to be, and if you go back in my catalog in the Cardinal channel and you watch my interview with Greg Bishop, who originated the co-creation theory, which is very interesting, as opposed to the ETH, the extraterrestrial hypothesis, that the person watching or witnessing the event has something to do with the event itself. A lot of people reflect back on their experiences and just, are freaked out by how incredibly absurd they are. It's like a performance. It's like they're putting on a show for one person or 2 people. So yeah, that's crazy. Let's see. I don't know which way I need to go here. Get the feeling your ex was doing Barry to your Dana Scully. Well, here's the thing about that. Let me say this about that. When it comes to abductions, if you study the literature, a lot of times one person is taken and the other person, their spouse or their significant other, is turned off. This happened with Carla Turner. This happened with Leah Haley. This happens all the time, to the degree that the aliens are after somebody that's in the back seat of the car. So the car pulls over. Everybody just sort of acts like a zombie. The person in the front passenger seat, moves the seat forward so they can get out, and then they just sit there for an hour and a half while the abduction occurs, and then they're returned and they open the seat back again and let them back in, and then drive on, and half an hour later they're like, what the hell happened? So it's not at all uncommon for that kind of thing. The Dwayne Barry thing in the X-Files.
I got to interrupt you real quick.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have segment 3 either in my email or shared on the drive. I have segment 1, segment 2 in the intro.
Mm-hmm.
But neither the Q&A, at least the new the one from today, the Q&A isn't there, and the third segment isn't there.
Well, we weren't going to do the Q&A anyway, because the Q&A was going to be our Q&A, right?
All right. Well, the third segment isn't there either.
Yeah, I got it right here.
All right, shoot it back over. Thank you. Carry on, good alien seekers.
Yeah. So the Dwayne Barry thing with the X-Files, they really overplayed it. It was obviously for dramatic effect. It was the episode where he's completely overwhelmed by the little grays that are obviously children in suits for that episode. But he also had mental issues and things like that. More questions? Anybody? Fire away. I'm good to go. Yes. Eric von Daniken, the way it was spelled for me by Mexican Alien Man, is correct. My ex was involved in a lot of stuff. Every time something happened outside the window, whether it was that chicka 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 chicka, the helicopter that didn't fade in or fade away, or the heavy breathing or whatever, I couldn't get her to stop talking. She interrupted me so much that I couldn't hear what was happening. And because I was at that time, especially in my life, intensely curious about this whole, alien agenda, what was going on with abductions and what was behind it, what they want, who they were, why they were here. It was infuriating to me that her default, for some reason, she was obviously programmed to make noise and prevent me from hearing and studying what was going on. Other experiences that I had, wow.
Boss, I still can't see it. I don't see a third one.
The third one, it's probably still on the
I'm looking in the folder. I don't see it shared with me.
8 minutes left. 8 minutes left.
Oh, good heavens. All right. Well, okay.
Yeah. So maybe this is a good time for you to go ahead and unleash one of your experiences. Mexican Alien Man.
Hold on, I'm coming back. I heard you just now. I think what I'd like to do is I'm going to hold on to that till next week, and I'm going to do it without my. I'm going to do it like eyeball to camera, so people can see my face when I go through it, because I've never actually done this live or with anyone before. So I want people to, I want to be as honest as I can, especially since I know some of the people here. I don't want to,
Sure.
hide behind the.
And actually, the Q&A that happened at the event was really, really good, when normally those kind of Q&As aren't. At UFO conventions and expos and shows, usually they're really dumb questions by really dumb people. And
I will, do me a favor, when you see that the 8-minute thingy is burned off, then just tell me and say so, and then I'll bring it in and I'll prep it.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to go ahead and stop the program. And welcome to Mr. MH. And welcome, Jill. How are you?
Hello. I'm doing wonderful. How are you doing?
It's very good to see you.
Good to see you too.
As I said at the beginning of the stream, it is amazing for you who have not lived a single lifetime to know as much as you do. You are a very wise man, Mr. Van Helsing. Sorry, Dr. Van Helsing. Yes, I watched Dracula the other day, and still profoundly great movie.
Wow.
So
cool.
let's go ahead and do our giveaway.
I'll need just a moment. I haven't shared screen yet.
Okay.
And so, share tab audio of the picker wheel and share.
So everyone, please go ahead and put your name into this link, and what is up for grabs is an amazing Into the Fringe t-shirt.
We have a couple new entrants here, so I'll add them to the wheel too.
So you can have one of these on white with the back that says youtube.com/cardinalsin, or you can elect to have in your size on black one of these wonderful Into the Fringe t-shirt designs, again with youtube.com/cardinalsin on the back. And
Very nice.
thank you. If you like them and you don't win the giveaway, you can always go to gillstore.com and choose from many different shirts, not just Into the Fringe, but I Am Not a Number, Masters of the Genre. In fact, I am drinking from the Masters of the Genre cup as we speak, designed by Mr. Nail Sin, Douglas Nelson. And it has the URL on the back, which is pretty fancy. So that's very cool. So everybody that would like to win an Into the Fringe t-shirt, please go ahead and subscribe and put your name into the
form, into the giveaway
link.
form.
Yeah, which is right here. And Jill, how many people do we have so far?
So far, we have five people. Including,
5 people. All right.
wait. I forgot to include myself too.
You always have to include yourself.
Yes, and I also included
Darius. All the mods are allowed. You know, eventually I want all the mods to have every form of giveaway there is. So yes, please do include yourself.
I included Canadian Spider-Man too, since he's on
Good.
the show a lot. He'd be
Good.
a great one to have the shirt too.
I probably should send him a shirt anyway, but
Right.
before we do the giveaways, I did say I would do a question and answer. So Monster Huntress Room has asked, at Cardinal Sin, my question, are people more susceptible to alien encounters / abductions more than others? Yes, apparently so. People of German and Irish extraction seem to be more likely to be abducted than others. This is not a scientific poll or result. I'm just answering with what I've heard. So it could be complete bullshit, but what I've heard is that people that have those two bits of heritage in their family might be more susceptible to that. And Mr. MH, some people have a history of abduction in their families. Indeed. In fact, the way it works, it seems, is if, as Mr. MH has mentioned, if your grandmother and your mother are abductees, you are likely to be an abductee, as are your children. and there's a great deal of literature that supports this, which we really don't have time to go into now, but I can definitely suggest, some reading material. Monster Hunter's Room, just because you have German and Irish heritage doesn't mean you're an abductee. However, it does seem that those people have sort of an advanced risk for being abducted. And I realize that makes no sense without, going into great detail about studies and scientific polls and that sort of thing. But that is the case. So please make sure that you are entered into our giveaway to win a spiffy Into the Fringe t-shirt at this URL. Cam says, Mr. MH, it was mostly a film of UFO symposium that the Cardinal organized in 1993. Was interesting. Glad you enjoyed it.
Wait, that was
It's
your
almost
symposium?
like we are
That's
animals
cool.
to them. We are tagged like animals and released and tracked down when necessary. Many people have said that. In fact, if you go back into the Cardinal Sin channel library and Into the Fringe and watch the Leah Haley lecture, it very much seems like that. And she said the very same thing. Darius Munchausen is worriedly looking at his family tree. My mom has told me stories of weird things that happened to her during UFO flaps. She has a sped up time incident. She remembers that when she was working at a store in Cicero, New York, she ... was driving home, watching her gas gauge, which was going low. Next thing she knew, she was no longer in the middle of nowhere and heading towards a city line. No recollection how she got there. Yep, that's not uncommon, unfortunately. Okay, Jill, how many people have we got for the giveaway?
Let's see. We have 7.
All right, let's spin that
Ready?
wheel.
All right. What?
Jill! Yes! Congratulations, you won
Thank you.
an Into the Fringe t-shirt. What size of women's t-shirt do you wear?
I'll take a medium, please.
A medium. You got it. I'm going to go ahead and mark that down so I don't forget. Very good. And of course, if you would like to get the nifty Into the Fringe t-shirt that Jill has just won, all you have to do is go to gillstore.com, and there's a wide variety of Cardinal Sin merch that you can buy there, and it is priced so there's little to no profit. In exchange for being a walking billboard for my channel, I make little to no profit. We're talking like 82 cents, if any. And so, yeah, there is the URL for the store. I'd like to thank everybody for sticking around. I know that this is, you have a wide choice of things that you can watch on Thursday evenings. And of course, please do join us on Sunday, which is Halloween. We are going to be having the Cardinal Sin 500 subscriber Halloween hangout. Woo!
What?
It's going to be a big
500
party
subscribers.
with possible celebrity pop-ins. So, yes, Jill, if you're available, I'll need all hands on deck. Sherry?
Is it same time, like at 3 o'clock?
Nope, we're going to start at 5.
5.
And we're going to end early. It's going to be a short show. We're going to end probably 7 o'clock, 7:30. Make sure Doomcock, can do his live stream because he's going to be reading my story, Highway to Heck,
Much appreciated.
which is in the same universe as Satan's Dog, which is also on the Cardinal Sin channel, if you should like to watch that. So, lots going on Halloween. And hope to see you there. And until then, it's Cardinal.